Leading a startup team, whether you're delivering a sugar rush, stocking coffee, or getting a regular delivery of snacks, Office Depot has solutions that fit every startup culture, from getting those first business cards and stationery to ordering fleece pullovers with your new logo. To learn how Office Depot and the California Technology Council have partnered to bring you savings on all of these startup essentials and more, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. The high cost of drug development, the challenge of translational research, and continuing concerns with R&D efficiency has had entrepreneurs, investors, and drug makers open to experimenting with new models of innovation. COI Pharmaceuticals, born out of a collaboration with the pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline and Avalon Ventures, is one such model that's showing traction. With management expertise, R&D infrastructure, and a collaborative environment, COI is providing promising startups with a way to accelerate their development in a capital-efficient way. We spoke to Jay Lichter, President and CEO of COI Pharmaceuticals, about the COI model, the challenges of cost-effective innovation, and what can be learned from COI's experience. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
We're going to talk about COI Pharmaceuticals, its new model of innovation, and whether we've learned anything about increasing the efficiency of R&D. Remind people about the drug discovery and development environment about 5 years or so. This was when Big Pharma was suffering from the patent cliff, and the math started to sink in that these companies were not going to be able to replace lost revenue with drugs developed in-house. There was a lot of talk about R&D efficiency. How much concern was there over Big Pharma's inability to innovate and develop drugs cost-effectively?
Yeah, so that's obviously been a story that Pharma's been talking about a lot. Maybe a little less now because people have made some investments of how to change that. But certainly 5 to 10 years ago, it was a big problem, and it was even worse then because we're still coming out of the sort of economic downturn. There weren't a lot of biotech companies with early stage offerings for large pharma. Early stage discovery was out of favor in terms of deal making, and so when big pharma in general realized that they had a problem innovating in house, they'd either grown too big or it was just hard in large companies to innovate. Simply looking to go shopping at small biotechs, there weren't hundreds of opportunities to look at. There were dozens, and so some real strategic initiatives had to take place in order to change that.
I think it's fair to say there's been a big change in thinking, a move towards externalizing R&D as companies have sought to make deals at the earliest stages and form agreements with academic researchers. Like a lot of things, though, in this industry, everyone seems to be following each other. In general, has this solved the problem for the industry? Has it created new problems?
Well, it hasn't solved the problem, and I'm not sure there is a solution other than hard work and getting lucky. Really, it's extremely complicated. Trying to understand enough biology to figure out how to intervene in that disease state biology to make a person sick from being sick and turning him into a healthy person. It's intensely difficult. It takes a long time, and still 95% of ideas fail before launch, and it takes 10 to 15 years to do that. And it's a $2 billion effort on a fully amortized basis, giving all the all the losses. So, I'm not sure it's ever going to be totally fixed. Excuse me, one second, cough. But things are certainly better, and being a little more capital efficient, taking some things at risk are things that biotech companies are really good at compared to large farmers. And I think investments that companies make into that sort of atmosphere do make things better.
GSK is a big pharma that seemed to take a more thoughtful approach to open innovation, and it's tried a variety of different things to allow discovery to take place in environments that are more akin to innovative startups rather than a large bureaucratic top-down structure. How did the talks between Avalon Ventures and GSK give rise to COI Pharmaceuticals, and what was GSK trying to accomplish? What did Avalon see as the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it was serendipity, really. Started out with a phone call from GSK. It was a fellow named Lon Cardin. And Lon and I had done a company in the early 90s. We were good friends. We were scientific colleagues. We were, on the road doing deals. And when the company got acquired, people all went their separate ways. And then maybe it was 10 or 15 years later, he finds himself as a senior vice president at GSK in charge of what's called alternative drug discovery. And he calls me up and he says, Jay, I'm at GSK now. And I said, okay, hey, good to hear from you, Lon. I hope all's going well. He says, well, we have a problem. Two problems. One is we're having difficulty innovating in early discovery. This is probably 2012. And the second thing is, the relationship between pharma and venture and biotech has gotten really bad, and this is really kind of the worst of the downturn of the market towards the end. And he said, is there something we can do together to address both of those problems? And I said, well, sure, I'd love to. It sounds really interesting. And so that led to a series of conversations that culminated in the announcement of our deal in April of 13, where our goal was to start 10 biotech companies. Now, in parallel, while those steps were going on, and maybe 2 or 3 years prior to that, I had been it just sort of happened sometimes in the business. I was running 3 companies. I was CEO of 3 little companies. And I decided to put them in the same space. And so it was very informal. We just rented some more space, and I had 3 companies there, and then that grew to 5 companies, and that grew to 7 or 8 companies. And all of a sudden, we had this sort of infrastructure of maybe 15 or 20 people spread across these 5 or 6 companies, and it was really capital efficient, right? I could have the senior team split amongst all these other groups. I could easily manage the different companies because it was just going down to the next door. It wasn't jumping on a plane going somewhere, and so it was really efficient. And so when we did the GSK deal, we took a sort of informal environment and turned it into something more formal because we knew we were going to need something more formal just because of the the sort of bureaucratic infrastructure of a large pharmaceutical company. And that's really what gave birth to COI, which was we had the incubator space. It wasn't formalized, and then with the GSK collaboration, we actually incorporated COI as a company and started using it to be a little more capital efficient.
Well, what were the terms of the original agreement? And actually, it's been renewed or updated. What is it now?
Well, we haven't really disclosed too many of the terms. There's a few things we've talked about. But we did in the first agreement, we started 7 companies. And under the second agreement, which was when we just raised a new fund, we've done 1 company. We have another one hopefully we're going to get done. And our goal is really still to get up to 10 or more companies. I think, the basic terms are that, we Avalon is capped in terms of the amount of capital we can put in. And that dollar amount we put in, we can get a venture return on if there's success, and if there's failure, then there's no money. They make investments based on R&D support, so they don't really get equity. And each company is targeted to have around $10 million of R&D, of which 3 to 3.5 comes from Avalon, the rest comes from GSK. And the notion is to start with a clever new drug target, typically, but not always, from academia, and make small molecules or antibodies or peptides or whatever, and prosecute that to a clinical candidate, which is roughly between 12 and 18 months from the clinic, and then Glaxo would acquire the company and move on. And so those are more or less the basic structure of how it works.
Does GSK have rights to? Is it a right of first refusal? Do they have a buy or don't buy decision point, or what?
Yeah, it's more of the latter. It's a buy. They have an option to acquire the company, and the economics are all pre-negotiated. So when we negotiated this back in 12-13. We got 500 pages worth of documents of everything from stock purchase agreements, letters, articles of incorporation for companies, merger agreement, R&D funding agreement. Everything is all pre-negotiated, so that it becomes very rapid. When we get a decision with GSK if we start a company, it's incorporated in a couple of days, and because of the way we have shared resources, I can staff it, within a week or so. And because COI does all the buying, we have credit, so we can buy things right away. There's capital equipment here, so the downtime from we're going to go to an operating laboratory doing experiments is really quite short.
How does GSK measure its return on investment in this situation?
That's a good question. I think for them, and we talked about that early on and with Lon, and he said, if they get one medicine out of this, it's probably worth it for them. And for me, that's sort of a defeatist attitude about how difficult this business is.
That speaks to R&D efficiency at Big Pharma.
It has to. Hopefully, it does. I think the metric is, there's a couple metrics. One is there's a milestone for each program. Well, first of all, how many investments do we make? The second measurement is how many get to this lead declaration sort of milestone, which is maybe 18 months into a company, and then how many they actually acquire, and then other ones they acquire, how many of them actually perform in phase 2. And so, and then there's a timeline and a budget consideration. That's pretty much how they measure it.
COI doesn't just develop companies in a GSK portfolio. You have other companies there as well. What is the percentage of companies that are COI versus GSK?
There's 15 companies in the incubator space right now. We've started 8 companies with GSK. We've terminated 2 of them. So, on a company basis, it's a little more than a third. I wish it was more like half, and we're trying to get more, but I think it's a good size, it's a good fraction. It was really important to both us and GSK early on to make sure that we had a business outside of the relationship with GSK, because it's that continued activity in the space, identifying new things, building the network, new companies, that actually adds value to their program, because they want that innovation. They want that spark. They don't want us to be GSK West. They want us to be COI, Avalon, and the organization that is sort of deep into the relationships on the West Coast and elsewhere where innovative technology takes place.
COI is actually an acronym for Community of Innovation. It suggests that these aren't just individual companies in an incubator or accelerator, but that there's interplay between them. Is there some way that you seek to leverage the expertise of everyone under the roof to help or benefit each other?
Absolutely. That is the key to the program, is that we get entrepreneurs in who are relatively young in their career, and in fact, this is how I started Avalon. You're a postdoc working someplace, and they start a company, and as a young postdoc, maybe you're in your 30s, you know an awful lot about the biological area or the chemistry area, and you know all the people, you know all the papers, you have all that stuff, but you don't know how to drug hunt. You don't know how to deal with transitioning an idea to a product and a product to a clinic. And so the senior team is very, very skilled at that. And so you have the senior group, which is spread between 4 or 5 companies. And that's very important because these little companies need that, I like to call this adult supervision of somebody who's been there, done that. But they also need the energy and the focus, the enthusiasm of someone who's like, I think I'm going to change the way people have this disease forever, and this is going to work, and there's no stopping. And so you put those two skill sets together, and it works great. So the benefit is you have a little company that needs that somebody who's a 30-year, 25, 30-year vet, but really can't afford a full-time person, and there is full-time work for that person. So some of these little companies who are with modest capital raise don't have the benefit of a senior person who's done put 20 or 30 compounds into the clinic. Maybe has 3 or 4 products. So it becomes extremely capital efficient, and there's a lot of interplay across the companies because the senior team, while everybody's responsible for their own company, several of the employees are shared amongst the different managers. So you have this. It is a community. It's not a company. It is a community of innovation where people really do work together. And there are times when a company's like, okay, we need extra resources for a few weeks. Let's shift things around and put extra couple people on this for a little bit. We can do that, and it's very, very flexible and efficient that way.
Well, one of the big areas that have troubled the biomedical research industry is the area of translational research, moving ideas from the lab to a point where they could attract venture investment or a pharma deal. Has COI been able to successfully overcome this hurdle?
We certainly did with the GSK collaboration, and that really is kind of the niche we live in and have for the last 30 years or so, is identifying early stage technologies, typically from universities, and advancing them to the point where there's an impedance match with big pharma that they can take them on board. And so we've had, over the years, a lot of examples of that, and companies where we've sold 2 companies to Genentech or 2 programs to Genentech. We sold a program to BioMarin. We have a few other, interesting transactions that we've done. Not all of them are announced, but we've had those successes, and I think the pharma industry does view us as living in that space of early translational to get a eureka idea from a university and turn it into a product.
It's still early days for you, but do you track metrics to measure your success? Can you say anything about spin-outs or licensing deals, fundraised by COI companies, clinical pipeline products?
Sure. I think the biggest success from the incubator is a company called Autonomy. It's a hearing company. And so when I started, and it was in the incubator for a while, it grew up. We raised a big Series B, we raised a big Series C, we raised a mezzanine round D, went public, raised $100 million, did 2 follow-ons as an improved product, and phase 3s are running on another product. So that came out of the incubator space. That came out of 3 guys, me and a couple other guys, and an idea and a bunch of patents we wrote, and it's turned into a sizable company. It's got 130, 140 employees, got a sales force, and so that's a big success. We also had a couple projects we licensed to Genentech. One was an oncology program. One is an anti-infective program. The anti-infective program looks like it'll be in the clinic next year. And then we had another program we sent to BioMarin. And that's still in discovery, but it was a good transaction. We've gotten some milestones from GSK. We expect one of our companies to be acquired later this year. So we are absolutely delivering, and we're also killing things when they need to be killed.
We've seen a proliferation of accelerators and incubators in recent years. They vary widely in approach. Are there lessons you can point to from your experience as to what works and what doesn't in creating an innovation ecosystem for life science companies? Or are there things you've done here that you think others should replicate?
Well, it's difficult to replicate thing. And the formula that works for us is all the companies in the incubator space are things that Avalon is invested in. And so, having that sort of unifying theme, I think makes this work, and that, the senior team is really, engaged as a group moving forward. I think that the J Labs thing works pretty well as well. You have to have your own capital, but it's, these short-term leases, a little bit of space, shared equipment. And so, if you have an idea and we have $1 million of friends and family money, and you want to, do some key experiments to find out, that worked pretty well. I think the Pfizer incubator space was a disaster, where they basically had extra space and they let people come in rent free, and they got an option to the program, people could be there. And to me, basically what a company does is they give an option to Pfizer from maybe $100,000 or $100,000 a year, which is whatever rent would be. And then if Pfizer doesn't want it, gets kicked out of the incubator space, and it's basically a tainted asset. So Pfizer never bought that many companies out of there, and the companies that were in there weren't very successful. So that certainly didn't work very well. I think the academic ones don't always work too well, simply because there's no capital. Where do you get the money? And you have to be able to find a way to get that money organized, and it's hard to do in an academic setting. So, there's definitely some things that have worked, and I think incubator spaces in general that revolve around either venture or pharma, if they're set up right, will have some degree of success.
Jay Lichter, President and CEO of COI Pharmaceuticals. Jay, thanks so much for the time today.
Yep, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.